7th graders, so your assignment today is called Punnett squares. Yesterday you should have watched the lecture video that accompanied the notes on Punnett squares and monohybrid crosses. If you haven't done that, you need to do this because that's not going to make a whole lot of sense for you guys yet. And it's really important moving forward with these last 2 weeks of material that you guys understand how to do these because they're going to be the bulk of the work from here on out. Okay, with that being said, your learning targets for today are I can identify genotypes and phenotypes of traits, and I can fill out a Punnett square correctly. So we're going to have a little bit of review with genotypes and phenotypes, and then we're going to kind of move on with some new material and just practice filling out Punnett squares. We're not going to be quite moving into monohybrid crosses yet. That'll come in a day or two. Okay, so this assignment has 3 parts to it. Part 1 is called phenotypes. So for this, you'll need to use the key on the right-hand side. This tells you 6 different traits and then what the dominant allele and the recessive allele are for those traits. So for this activity, you are given the genotype, so you can see what 2 combination of alleles the parents pass down, and you're asked to find the phenotype. So as a reminder, the phenotype is the physical appearance. Again, I always like to remember phenotype because it starts with PH, as does physical appearance. So that's kind of my way of remembering. All right, so big thing to remember when you guys are doing this is probably the easier of the 2 to do, is anytime you guys have a capital letter in your genotype, it means that there's a dominant allele, and it doesn't matter what the other allele is passed down. If that dominant allele is present, it's going to be the phenotype of that individual. So I would look over here and say, all right, this one has a capital B, this one has a dominant allele. So I'm going to look over at my key and say, all right, I'm obviously looking at eye color here, and my dominant allele for that is, the big B is the brown eyes. So that means that this individual will have brown eyes, okay? So it's phenotype brown eyes, okay? Versus something like this where I have little t, okay, I have no capital letters there, meaning I have no dominant alleles. Neither parent passed down the dominant trait. Okay, so the only thing that's available is the recessive, so that means that individual would not be able to roll their tongue. They'd be a non-roller. Okay, so that's how you do part 1. Part 2 is genotypes, where I give you the phenotype. So I give you what physical appearance they have, and you have to tell me what the genotype is. For this one, it's probably easier for you guys just to use the draw tool, okay? So you can grab your handy dandy pen over there, and then it's easy for you guys just to write the genotype right in there. Why I wouldn't suggest typing is a lot of times when you guys type, especially if you start with a lowercase letter, it's going to try to capitalize it for you guys. Okay, so that might mess up the genotype you're intending to write. So the draw tool would probably be easiest for this part. All right, for the genotype, you guys might have more than one option. So you guys really have to think about which genotype could give that trait. Okay, so let's take, for instance, brown eyes. Okay, we have brown eyes right here where the dominant trait is brown and the recessive trait is the lowercase b for blue eyes. Okay, so brown eyes, really, if we're looking at a genotype, it could be big B, or it could be big B, little b. Okay, both of those would give me brown eyes. I didn't give you guys enough information on this one to tell you whether it would be either big B, or big B, little b. So you need to write both. Okay, make sure they're separated because a genotype only has 2 letters, one to indicate what mom passed down and one to indicate what dad passed down. Okay, something like straight hairline, we can look and say, all right, hairline can either be dominant widow's peak using a capital W or recessive straight hairline. Okay, now that one only has one option, and we do know the genotype because the only option would be little w. Make sure you guys can kind of tell the difference between little w's and capital W's. Okay, let's look at one that has enough information. Okay, one thing I saw with the potato babies and with the alien sheet is that we're really confused a little bit about what homozygous means and what heterozygous means. So remember that homo means the same. So if I'm looking at a genotype that has big B, okay, like this one, let's see, I don't have any big B's right there. So let's go big H, okay? Those are the 2 dominant alleles. They're the same, so that's homozygous, okay? But you could have homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive, so which would that be? That would be homozygous dominant, okay? Versus this, little t, both are recessive. They're the same, okay? So that would be homozygous recessive. Versus something like this, where we have big D, little d, okay? we have a dominant and a recessive. They are not the same. That's heterozygous. Hetero means a mix. So you have a mix of the dominant and the recessive. Okay, so moving back to this, if I'm looking at something that's homozygous dominant, I already know off the top of my head, it doesn't even matter what the phenotype says. I know that it's going to be 2 capital letters, right? Homo means the same, so I know they either have to be both dominant or both recessive, but in this case, they're going to be dominant. So for brown hair, we're using capital D's. So capital D, okay? Versus heterozygous, you know you have a mix, so you would have 1 dominant and 1 recessive. So think about what your guys' genotype would be, where you had 1 dominant allele and 1 recessive allele. Okay, moving on to the last part, you guys again will use the draw tool for this. Okay, for this one, all you guys are going to do is fill in the Punnett squares. So outside we put the parents' alleles, what they could possibly pass down to their children, and then on the inside we're going to put all the possible combinations of genotypes for the kids. So this one would go here, this one would go here, so you guys would write big B, big B. This one would go here, this one would go here, so again, big B, big B. It's kind of like playing Battleship. This one would go here, this one would go here, so big B, little b. And then finally this one would go here, and this one would go here, so another big B, little b. So all you guys are using is the draw tool to fill in the Punnett squares, okay? Some of these, I've given you all of the genotypes of the parents on the outside, but if we move on and look at one of these other slides, we can see that we have some missing pieces here. Okay, so you guys might see something like this where you may be given some information of what the offspring would look like, and then you need to use that to not only fill out the rest of this, but to also tell me the missing allele of the parent. Okay, this one has 1 parent that is missing an allele, but I give you a little information right there to help you. So you guys would fill out those 3 pieces of information and this one right here. Okay, last slide, a lot more like that, where this one I've given you a piece of information. You're going to fill out that, but now I have 2 parents missing alleles. Okay, so use this as your hint and these as your hint to help you fill them out. Okay, this one again, you have 3 and you're missing 1 parent allele. This one you're missing a whole parent's genotype, but you have 2 offspring genotypes to help you. Okay, this one I'm missing both parents' genotypes, but again I have 3 offspring genotypes to help you. Okay, so just fill in these pieces. If you notice letters missing on the outside, make sure you get those, and obviously all the letters or genotypes that you're missing on the inside, make you get those. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll go ahead and put a little wrap up on there so you guys can kind of let me know if this makes sense to you or not, and I hope you all are having a great day. Bye.